The morning sun cast long shadows across Windsor Castle as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood before the ornate mirror in her private chambers. Her reflection showed a woman who had aged beyond her years in recent months, the weight of responsibility and grief etched into every line of her face. The black dress she had chosen was elegant yet somber, befitting the occasion that would mark one of the most difficult days in the royal family's recent history. William entered quietly, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. He, too, wore black, his military bearing evident even in civilian clothes. The couple exchanged a look that spoke volumes without words. They had been preparing for this day for weeks, yet nothing could truly ready them for the emotional toll it would take. The castle buzzed with quiet activity as staff members moved with practiced efficiency, preparing for the ceremony that would soon unfold. Florists arranged white lilies and roses throughout the chapel, their fragrance filling the air with a bittersweet reminder of life's beauty and fragility. The sound of distant church bells carried across the grounds, a haunting melody that seemed to echo the collective mood of the nation. Catherine's lady-in-waiting approached with a small jewelry box, inside which lay a pearl necklace that had belonged to Queen Elizabeth II. The princess accepted it with trembling hands, knowing that wearing it today would be both an honor and a burden. As she fastened the clasp, she could almost feel the weight of history and tradition settling around her shoulders like a mantle she was not quite ready to bear. The couple's children had been carefully prepared for the day ahead, though explaining the gravity of the situation to young minds had proved challenging. Prince George, now displaying maturity beyond his years, had insisted on being present for the entire ceremony. Princess Charlotte, sensitive and perceptive, had asked thoughtful questions that revealed her deep understanding of the family's loss. Prince Louis, still young enough to be somewhat sheltered from the full impact, would participate in only part of the proceedings. As they made their way through the castle's corridors, William and Catherine were joined by other members of the royal family, each carrying their own burden of grief and responsibility. The procession that formed was both formal and intimate, a gathering of people united by blood, duty, and shared sorrow. Their footsteps echoed against the stone walls, creating a rhythm that seemed to match the heavy beating of their hearts. The chapel doors opened to reveal hundreds of guests, all dressed in black, their faces reflecting the solemnity of the occasion. Dignitaries from around the world sat alongside longtime friends and family members, creating a tapestry of relationships that spoke to the far-reaching impact of the life they had come to honor. The atmosphere was thick with emotion, yet there was also an underlying sense of celebration for a life well lived. Catherine paused at the threshold, drawing strength from her husband's steady presence beside her. She thought of all the guidance she had received over the years, the countless conversations about duty and service that had shaped her understanding of her role. Today, she would need to embody every lesson learned, every piece of wisdom shared, as she helped lead the royal family through this moment of profound transition. The organ began to play a hymn that had been specifically chosen for its meaning, to the departed. The melody filled the chapel with a sound both mournful and uplifting, capturing the complex emotions that swirled through the gathered assembly. William squeezed his wife's hand gently, a small gesture that communicated volumes about their partnership and mutual support. As they took their places in the front of the chapel, Catherine found herself thinking about the conversations she had shared with the person they were honoring today. The advice about balancing public duty with private happiness, the discussions about raising children in the spotlight, and the gentle corrections when protocol demanded certain behaviors, all of these memories flooded back with crystal clarity. The ceremony began with words of welcome from the Archbishop, his voice carrying clearly through the chapel's acoustics. He spoke of service, dedication, and the eternal nature of love, themes that resonated deeply with everyone present. Catherine listened intently, drawing comfort from the familiar rhythms of the service, while simultaneously feeling the weight of her own future responsibilities settling more firmly upon her shoulders. Behind them, the sound of quiet weeping could be heard as other mourners struggled with their own emotions. The staff who had served faithfully for decades, the friends who had shared decades of memories, and the extended family members who had looked up to the departed as a pillar of strength, all were united in their grief and their determination to honor a remarkable legacy. William glanced sideways at his wife, noting the way she held herself with such dignified composure, despite the tears that threatened to spill from her eyes. He marveled at her strength, knowing how deeply she felt this loss and yet how determined she was to fulfill her role with grace and honor. Their children, seated beside them, seemed to sense their parents' emotions and sat with unusual stillness, their young faces serious and attentive. The first reading began, chosen specifically for its message of hope and continuity. As the words washed over the congregation, Catherine found herself reflecting on the cycles of life and death that had shaped the royal family for generations. She understood that today marked not just an ending, but also a beginning, a new chapter in which she and William would carry forward the traditions and values that had been so carefully preserved and passed down to them. The chapel's stained glass windows cast colorful patterns on the stone floor, creating a beautiful backdrop for the solemn proceedings. These same windows had witnessed countless ceremonies over the centuries, from joyous celebrations to moments of profound sorrow. Today, they seemed to glow with a special warmth, as if acknowledging the significance of the farewell taking place beneath their protective gaze. As the service continued, Catherine felt a growing sense of purpose alongside her grief. She knew that this day would be remembered not just for its sadness, but for the dignity and love with which the royal family chose to say goodbye to someone who had meant so much to them all. The second hymn filled the chapel with voices joined in harmony, creating a sound that seemed to lift the collective spirit of all present. Catherine's own voice wavered slightly as she sang words that held new meaning in light of their recent loss. Beside her, William's deeper tones provided a steady anchor, much as his presence had done throughout the difficult weeks leading up to this moment. Prince George stood on tiptoes to better see over the heads of those in front of him, his curiosity about the ceremony evident despite the solemnity of the occasion. Catherine gently placed a hand on his shoulder, both to steady him and to draw comfort from his youthful resilience. She marveled at how children possessed an innate ability to find wonder even in the midst of sadness, reminding adults of life's continuing capacity for beauty and hope. The Archbishop stepped forward to deliver the eulogy, his words carefully crafted to capture both the public achievements and private virtues of the person they had come to honor. He spoke of unwavering dedication to duty, of countless charitable endeavors undertaken without fanfare, and of the quiet wisdom that had guided so many important decisions over the years. Each sentence painted a picture of a life lived with purpose and integrity. As the eulogy continued, Catherine found her mind wandering to personal memories that would never be shared with the public. The private moments of laughter over afternoon tea, the gentle teasing about fashion choices, and the serious conversations about the challenges of raising children in the royal spotlight. These intimate recollections formed a parallel narrative to the formal tribute being offered, one that spoke to the human heart beneath the public persona. The chapel's atmosphere grew even more charged with emotion as the Archbishop described acts of kindness that had touched countless lives. Stories emerged of hospital visits made without media attention, of personal letters written to comfort those in distress, and of quiet interventions that had changed the course of entire charitable organizations. These tales revealed a legacy that extended far beyond official duties and ceremonial appearances. William shifted slightly in his seat, his composure beginning to crack as particularly poignant memories were shared. Catherine instinctively moved closer to him, their shoulders, touching in a gesture of mutual support that went unnoticed by most observers but spoke volumes about their partnership. She could feel his struggle to maintain the dignified facade expected of him while processing his own deep grief. Princess Charlotte looked up at her mother with wide, questioning eyes, seeking reassurance in the face of emotions she was only beginning to understand. Catherine offered a gentle smile and a subtle nod, communicating that it was acceptable to feel sad while also honoring the person they were celebrating. The delicate balance between grief and gratitude was something the young princess would need to learn as part of her own royal education. The music that accompanied the service had been chosen with extraordinary care, each piece reflecting different aspects of the departed's personality and preferences. A Bach piece that had been particularly beloved was performed by a string quartet, their instruments weaving together melodies that seemed to capture the complexity of human emotion. The sound filled every corner of the chapel, creating an atmosphere that was both mournful and triumphant. As the service moved toward its conclusion, representatives from various charitable organizations were invited to speak briefly about the impact of the royal patronage they had received. Their words painted a picture of dedication that had spanned decades, of relationships built on mutual respect and shared commitment to making a positive difference in the world. Each testimony added another layer to the portrait of a life dedicated to service. Catherine listened to these tributes with growing appreciation for the full scope of the legacy she and William were inheriting. The weight of expectation felt enormous, but she also sensed the strength that came from being part of something larger than herself. The traditions and values being passed down had been refined and strengthened by each generation, creating a foundation upon which she could build her own contributions. The moment arrived for the family to offer their own tribute, and William rose slowly from his seat. Catherine watched as her husband walked toward the lectern, knowing how difficult this would be for him. His speech had been written and rewritten multiple times, each draft an attempt to capture feelings that seemed too vast and complex for mere words. William's voice was steady but emotional as he began to speak, his words carrying the authority of someone who had been deeply loved and carefully taught by the person they were honoring. He spoke of guidance received, of lessons learned through example rather than instruction, and of the profound gratitude he felt for having been shaped by such wisdom and compassion. His tribute was both personal and universal, touching on themes that resonated with everyone present. The congregation hung on every word, recognizing the rare glimpse into the private relationships that existed behind the public facade of royal life. William spoke of bedtime stories read to his children, of advice given during moments of uncertainty, and of the constant presence of someone who had represented stability and continuity in an ever-changing world. His words painted a picture of love that transcended titles and positions. Catherine felt tears streaming down her face as her husband continued his tribute, his composure beginning to waver as he reached the more personal elements of his speech. She knew how much strength it was taking for him to stand there and share these intimate memories with the world, and she felt a surge of pride in his courage and authenticity. The children sat transfixed as their father spoke, beginning to understand more fully the significance of their loss and the importance of the person whose life they were celebrating. For them, this was not just a formal ceremony, but a profound lesson in love, loss, and the continuity of family bonds that transcend physical presence. As William concluded his remarks and returned to his seat, the chapel fell into a silence that seemed to hold the collective breath of everyone present. The words he had spoken would be remembered and quoted for years to come. But in this moment, they existed as a pure expression of love and gratitude shared between a family and the world that had come to pay their respects. The final hymn began with a single voice, pure and clear, rising from the choir loft like a prayer made audible. Gradually, other voices joined in, creating harmonies that seemed to lift the entire congregation beyond their immediate grief towards something approaching peace. Catherine felt the music wash over her, carrying with it memories of countless other services she had attended, times when these same melodies had marked moments of celebration rather than farewell. As the last notes faded into silence, the processional began. The immediate family rose first, moving with practiced dignity despite the emotional weight of the moment. Catherine took William's arm, feeling the slight tremor in his muscles that betrayed the effort it was taking to maintain his composure. Together, they began the slow walk toward the chapel doors, their children following with careful steps that reflected both their youth and their growing understanding of ceremonial importance. The path from the chapel to the final resting place had been lined with members of the military, their dress uniforms creating a corridor of honor that stretched across the castle grounds. As the family emerged into the afternoon sunlight, the sound of bagpipes filled the air, their haunting melody carried by the wind across the ancient stones of the castle walls. The music seemed to bridge the gap between earthly sorrow and eternal rest. Hundreds of people had gathered beyond the formal processional route, their faces reflecting a mixture of respect and genuine affection. Many held flowers, others simply stood in silent tribute, but all seemed united in their desire to be present for this moment of collective farewell. Catherine noticed how the crowd included people of all ages, from elderly individuals who had followed royal events for decades to young families who had brought their children to witness history. The weight of tradition felt particularly heavy as they walked the path that had been traversed by generations of royals before them. Each step seemed to echo with the footfalls of those who had made this same journey in centuries past, carrying their own burdens of loss and responsibility. Catherine found comfort in this continuity, knowing that she and William were part of an unbroken chain of service that stretched back through history. Prince George walked with remarkable composure for his age, his young face serious as he seemed to grasp the significance of his role in the proceedings. Occasionally, he would glance up at his parents for reassurance, but mostly he focused straight ahead, following their example of dignified behavior even in the face of deep emotion. His maturity in this moment spoke to the careful preparation he had received for his future responsibilities. The afternoon sun cast dappled shadows through the trees that lined their route, creating patterns of light and darkness that seemed symbolic of life's complex mixture of joy and sorrow. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves overhead, producing a soft rustling that harmonized with the more formal sounds of the ceremony. Nature itself seemed to be participating in the farewell, adding its own quiet tribute to the proceedings. As they approached the final destination, Catherine could see the gravesite that had been prepared with meticulous care. Fresh earth was covered with a blanket of flowers, their colors providing a beautiful contrast to the solemnity of the occasion. The headstone, simple yet elegant, bore an inscription that captured the essence of a life dedicated to service and love. Surrounding the grave, more flowers had been arranged in patterns that reflected both personal preferences and traditional symbolism. The gathered family formed a circle around the grave, their positioning reflecting both protocol and genuine affection. Each person present had been touched by the departed in unique ways, yet all shared the common bond of love and respect that had brought them together on this difficult day. The diversity of their relationships, blood relatives, in-laws, godchildren, and close friends, testified to a life that had been rich in meaningful connections. A final prayer was offered, its words chosen for their message of hope and continuity. The Archbishop's voice carried clearly in the still air, each syllable weighted with the solemnity of the moment. As he spoke of eternal rest and lasting legacy, Catherine felt a complex mixture of sadness and gratitude wash over her. The grief was undeniable, but so too was the deep appreciation for having been part of someone so remarkable. When the time came to place flowers on the grave, each family member approached individually, their movements slow and deliberate. Catherine had chosen white roses, their beauty and fragrance representing her respect and love. As she knelt to place them carefully among the other tributes, she whispered a private goodbye, words meant for no ears but her own, and perhaps those of the person who would always hold a special place in her heart. William's tribute was similarly personal, his flower selection reflecting memories known only to him and the departed. His movements were careful and reverent, each gesture carrying the weight of years of shared experiences and mutual affection. As he stepped back from the grave, Catherine could see the tracks of tears on his cheeks, evidence of emotions too deep to be contained by royal protocol. The children approached together, their smaller tributes no less meaningful than those of the adults. They had chosen their flowers with care, guided by their parents, but ultimately making their own decisions about how to express their feelings. Their innocence and sincerity added a poignant dimension to the ceremony, reminding everyone present of the continuing cycles of life and love that transcend individual loss. As the last flower was placed and the final prayer concluded, the family stood together in a moment of silent reflection. The formal ceremony was drawing to a close, but the process of saying goodbye would continue long after the public aspects of the farewell had ended. Each person present would carry their own memories and grief forward, processing their loss in ways that were uniquely personal, yet connected to this shared experience. The sun was beginning to lower in the sky, casting longer shadows across the grounds and painting the scene in softer hues. This natural transition seemed to mirror the emotional shift taking place among the mourners, as the acute pain of formal goodbye began to give way to something approaching acceptance. The day had been about honoring the past, but it also marked the beginning of a future in which the departed's influence would continue to be felt through the lives they had touched. The private reception that followed the graveside ceremony took place in one of Windsor Castle's more intimate drawing rooms, away from the public eye and media attention. Here, the immediate family and closest friends gathered to share memories and find comfort in each other's presence. The atmosphere was markedly different from the formal ceremony. While still respectful, it allowed for more personal expressions of grief and celebration of life. Catherine moved through the room with quiet grace, checking on family members, and ensuring that everyone felt included in this final phase of the farewell. Her natural warmth and empathy, qualities that had endeared her to the public, were particularly evident as she offered comfort to those who needed it most. She had learned over the years that sometimes the most meaningful support came not from grand gestures but from simple presence and genuine understanding. Elderly relatives who had traveled great distances to be present shared stories from decades past, their voices trembling with emotion as they recounted memories of childhood adventures and family traditions. These tales painted a picture of someone who had remained fundamentally unchanged despite the enormous responsibilities that had been placed upon them over the years. The consistency of character that emerged from these stories was both comforting and inspiring to those who would now carry the family legacy forward. Prince Philip's absence was felt keenly in the room, as many of the gathered family members recalled how he would have handled such occasions with his characteristic blend of formality and unexpected humor. His ability to lighten difficult moments while still maintaining appropriate respect had been one of his most endearing qualities, and several guests found themselves sharing gentle anecdotes that brought smiles even in the midst of sorrow. William spent considerable time with some of the staff members who had served faithfully for many years, recognizing that their grief was as genuine and profound as that of the blood relatives. These individuals had often spent more daily time with the departed than family members could, and their perspectives on personality quirks and private moments added depth to the collective picture of who was being remembered. Their inclusion in this private gathering demonstrated the family's recognition of service and loyalty that had extended far beyond formal duties. The children, now released from the constraints of formal ceremony, moved more freely through the room, though their Behavior remained respectful and subdued. They seemed to sense that this was a different kind of gathering, one where emotions could be expressed more openly and where the rigid protocols of public appearances could be relaxed. Their questions about the stories being shared showed a growing understanding of family history and their place within it. Princess Charlotte approached her grandmother with a drawing she had made, its childish lines and bright colors standing in stark contrast to the day's somber tones. The artwork depicted the family together, including the person they had just laid to rest, showing the young princess's instinctive understanding that love and memory could transcend physical presence. Her offering was received with tears and gratitude, representing the kind of innocent wisdom that often provided the deepest comfort. Conversation gradually shifted from specific memories to broader reflections on legacy and influence. Family members spoke of lessons learned, values instilled, and examples set that would continue to guide their decisions in years to come. The discussion revealed how profoundly one person's character and choices had shaped multiple generations, creating ripples of influence that would extend far into the future. Catherine found herself in conversation with several of the charitable organization representatives who had been included in this private gathering. Their stories of behind-the-scenes support and guidance revealed aspects of the departed's character that the public had rarely seen. These accounts of personal involvement in improving lives and supporting causes demonstrated how royal duty had been elevated beyond mere obligation to become genuine passion and commitment. The room's atmosphere was enriched by the presence of personal mementos and photographs that had been carefully selected for the occasion. These items told a visual story of a life fully lived, from formal portraits marking official milestones to candid family snapshots that captured moments of pure joy and relaxation. Each image seemed to hold its own collection of memories for different viewers, creating multiple layers of meaning within the shared space. As afternoon moved toward evening, some of the older guests began to take their leave, the emotional and physical demands of the day taking their toll. Their departures were marked by extended embraces and whispered words of comfort, each goodbye carrying the weight of shared loss and mutual support. The gradual thinning of the gathering seemed natural and appropriate, allowing for more intimate conversations among those who remained. William and Catherine found themselves with a few moments alone, standing by one of the room's tall windows that looked out over the castle grounds. The view encompassed the chapel where the ceremony had taken place and the garden where the final farewell had occurred, creating a visual reminder of the journey they had taken together throughout this difficult day. Their conversation was quiet and personal, touching on their own feelings while also acknowledging the responsibilities that lay ahead. The couple discussed how they would help their children process the day's events and the loss they had experienced. They recognized that this was likely the first time their children had encountered death so directly, and they wanted to ensure that the lessons learned would be healthy and constructive. Their approach would need to balance honesty about grief with reassurance about the continuity of love and family bonds. As the gathering began to wind down, several family members took time to examine more closely some of the personal effects that had been displayed throughout the room. These items, books with handwritten notes, pieces of jewelry with family significance, and letters expressing private thoughts, provided tangible connections to the person who was no longer physically present, but whose influence remained strong. The evening light streaming through the windows cast a warm glow over the assembled group, creating an atmosphere that seemed to honor both the sadness of loss and the gratitude for having been part of something meaningful and lasting. The transition from public ceremony to private reflection had allowed for a more complete expression of the complex emotions that such occasions invariably produce. Catherine realized that this gathering represented not just an ending, but also a beginning, the start of a new chapter in which she and William would take on greater responsibilities while carrying forward the values and traditions they had been taught. The weight of this transition was significant, but so too was the foundation of love and support that would sustain them through the challenges ahead. The days that followed the funeral brought a different kind of challenge for William and Catherine as they navigated the complex process of returning to public duties while still processing their private grief. The world expected them to resume their royal responsibilities, but the emotional impact of their loss required time and space that public life rarely afforded. They found themselves walking a delicate line between honoring their feelings and meeting the expectations placed upon them. Catherine spent hours reviewing the condolence messages that had poured in from around the world. Each letter, card, and email represented someone who had been touched by the life they had just celebrated, and she felt a responsibility to acknowledge as many as possible personally. The task was overwhelming in its scope, but it also provided comfort in demonstrating how far-reaching the influence and affection had been. The children's adjustment to their new reality required careful attention and support. Prince George, with his natural sensitivity and growing awareness of his future role, asked thoughtful questions about death, memory, and the continuation of royal duties. His parents worked to provide honest answers while also offering reassurance about the stability of their family unit and the love that would always surround him. Princess Charlotte expressed her grief through art and storytelling, creating elaborate drawings and narratives that helped her process emotions too complex for her young vocabulary. Catherine recognized these creative expressions as healthy coping mechanisms and encouraged them while also ensuring that her daughter had opportunities to talk about her feelings when words seemed adequate to the task. Prince Louis, being the youngest, required a different approach entirely. His understanding of the permanent nature of their loss was limited, and his parents chose to focus on maintaining routines and providing extra comfort rather than attempting explanations that might only create confusion. His resilience and natural cheerfulness actually provided moments of lightness during an otherwise heavy time. The couple's first public engagement following the funeral was carefully chosen for its significance and appropriateness. They visited a hospice that had been particularly close to the heart of the person they had lost, meeting with patients, families, and staff members who had benefited from years of royal patronage and support. The visit served multiple purposes: honoring the departed's memory, continuing important charitable work, and beginning their own healing process through service to others. Catherine was struck by how many people at the hospice shared stories of personal encounters with the royal family member they were mourning. These tales of bedside visits, encouraging words, and ongoing interest in individual cases revealed a level of personal engagement that had gone largely unrecorded by the media. The depth of genuine care and connection that emerged from these conversations provided new insights into the character they were working to honor and emulate. William found himself thinking frequently about the advice he had received over the years about balancing public service with personal well-being. The wisdom shared had emphasized the importance of finding meaning in duty while also maintaining authentic human connections. As he navigated his first weeks of increased responsibility, these lessons took on new relevance and urgency. The administrative aspects of their expanded role proved more complex than they had anticipated. The transfer of patronages, the assumption of new ceremonial duties, and the coordination of schedules to accommodate additional responsibilities required significant adjustment and support from their staff. Catherine appreciated more fully the years of preparation that had gone into readying them for this transition, even as she recognized how much learning still lay ahead. Private moments at home took on increased importance as they provided necessary respite from the demands of public life. Evening conversations between William and Catherine often centered on processing the day's experiences and planning for upcoming challenges. They found that their partnership had been strengthened by sharing this period of transition, as they each brought different perspectives and strengths to the situations they encountered. The couple made a conscious decision to maintain certain family traditions while also establishing new ones that reflected their own values and circumstances. Sunday family dinners, bedtime reading routines, and informal discussions about current events became anchors of stability in an otherwise rapidly changing landscape. These domestic rhythms provided essential grounding for both parents and children. Letters and gifts from the public continued to arrive weeks after the funeral, many containing personal stories of how the departed had influenced individual lives, through charitable work, public service, or simply by example. Catherine read many of these communications personally, finding in them both inspiration and guidance for her own approach to royal duties. The consistent themes that emerged, kindness, dedication, and authentic care for others, became touchstones for her own developing style. William's relationship with other senior members of the royal family evolved during this period as, well, conversations that had previously been primarily social in nature now included discussions of substantial policy matters and constitutional responsibilities. He found himself being consulted on decisions that would have significant implications for the monarchy's future, marking a clear shift in his role within the family structure. The couple began to plan their first major international trip since the funeral, recognizing that diplomatic responsibilities would require them to represent the crown on the global stage with even greater visibility and responsibility. The preparation for such engagements now carried additional weight, as they would be stepping into roles that had been filled with such distinction by the person they were mourning. Catherine's wardrobe choices during this transitional period were carefully considered, as they needed to reflect both appropriate mourning and the dignity of her expanding role. She worked with her stylist to develop looks that honored traditional expectations while also expressing her own personality and style. The balance between respectful formality and authentic personal expression required thoughtful navigation of complex protocols and public expectations. Educational opportunities for their children became a particular focus, as William and Catherine recognized that the young royals would need enhanced preparation for their own future roles. Private tutoring in constitutional history, diplomatic protocol, and charitable leadership was arranged to supplement their formal schooling. The goal was to provide them with knowledge and skills that would serve them well, while also allowing them to maintain as normal a childhood as possible. The couple's evening routine increasingly included time devoted to reviewing briefing materials and planning for upcoming engagements. This professional aspect of their relationship, while necessary, required careful balance with their roles as spouses and parents. They worked to ensure that royal duties enhanced rather than overshadowed their family life, drawing lessons from the example that had been set for them over the years. 3 months after the funeral, William and Catherine found themselves preparing for their first major state occasion as senior working royals, a responsibility that would have previously been shared with the family member they had lost. The weight of this transition was particularly evident as they reviewed protocols and traditions that had been maintained for decades through the careful attention and dedication of someone who was no longer there to guide them. Catherine stood, once again, before her mirror, but this time preparing for a celebration rather than a farewell. The state banquet she was about to attend would host dignitaries from around the world, and her role in ensuring its success carried significance that extended far beyond the evening's festivities. Her dress, a deep blue that honored both tradition and her own sense of style, represented the careful balance she was learning to strike between personal expression and royal expectation. The children had grown noticeably in the months since the funeral, not just physically, but in their understanding of their family's unique position in the world. Prince George now asked more sophisticated questions about the constitutional role of the monarchy, while Princess Charlotte had begun to show interest in the charitable aspects of royal work. Their development reminded their parents that the cycle of preparation and responsibility continued across generations. William's confidence in his expanded role had grown significantly since those first overwhelming weeks following their loss. He had developed working relationships with government officials, diplomatic representatives, and charitable organization leaders that were distinctly his own while still honoring the traditions he had inherited. His natural leadership abilities were becoming more evident as he settled into responsibilities that demanded both ceremonial presence and substantive engagement. The evening of the state banquet arrived with all the pageantry and precision that such occasions demanded. As Catherine took her place in the receiving line, she reflected on how natural this now felt, despite the magnitude of what she was undertaking. The months of careful preparation, both practical and emotional, had equipped her to fulfill her role with confidence and grace. Throughout the evening's events, from the formal reception through the elaborate dinner and speeches, Catherine found herself thinking about the person who had taught her so much about navigating these complex social and diplomatic situations. The lessons learned through observation and gentle guidance now served her well as she engaged with world leaders, making conversation that was both appropriately formal and genuinely warm. William's speech to the assembled dignitaries touched on themes of international cooperation and shared values, but it also reflected the personal growth he had experienced through loss and increased responsibility. His words carried authority earned through experience rather than merely inherited through position, marking a clear evolution in his public presence and confidence. The couple's children, watching portions of the evening's events from a private viewing area, were beginning to understand more fully what their futures might hold. Their questions afterward revealed both curiosity and some apprehension about the responsibilities they would one day assume. Their parents worked to provide honest answers while emphasizing the rewards that came from service to others. As the formal portion of the evening concluded and the last guests departed, William and Catherine found themselves alone in one of the castle's grand reception rooms. The success of the evening felt like a meaningful milestone in their journey toward fully embracing their expanded roles. They had not merely survived their first major test, but had genuinely succeeded in creating an event that honored both tradition and their own vision for the future. Their conversation that night touched on how much they had learned and grown since the funeral, but also on how much they still missed the guidance and presence of the person who had prepared them so well for this moment. The grief remained, but it had evolved into something that included gratitude alongside sorrow and determination alongside loss. Catherine realized that she had begun to think less about whether she was fulfilling her role correctly and more about how she could use her position to make a meaningful difference in the world. This shift in perspective represented a significant step in her personal development as a working royal, moving from concern about external approval to focus on substantive contribution. The following weeks brought a series of engagements that allowed the couple to explore different aspects of their royal duties. They visited schools where they could interact with young people, attended charitable fundraisers where they could support important causes, and participated in ceremonial events that maintained important traditions. Each engagement provided opportunities to apply lessons learned while also developing their own distinctive approach to royal service. William's relationship with his father had deepened during this period of transition as they worked together to ensure continuity in the monarchy's approach to constitutional and ceremonial responsibilities. Their conversations now included discussions of long-term strategic planning for the institution they both served, marking William's evolution from heir to active senior partner in the family's work. Catherine's own relationship with charitable organizations had evolved significantly since taking on additional patronages. She approached each new responsibility with the same thorough preparation that had characterized her earlier royal work, but now with enhanced authority and expanded scope for influence. Her ability to connect authentically with people from all walks of life had become one of her greatest strengths as a working royal. The anniversary of the funeral approached with mixed emotions for the family. They had successfully navigated a year of significant change and growth, proving to themselves and the world that they could honor their inheritance while also making it their own. The planned memorial service would be smaller and more intimate than the original funeral, focusing on celebration of life rather than formal farewell. As Catherine prepared for this memorial event, she chose to wear a piece of jewelry that had belonged to the person they were remembering, a gesture that felt both appropriate and personally meaningful. The months of grief and growth had taught her that the best way to honor someone's memory was to embody the values they had represented, while also bringing one's own authentic self to the responsibilities they had passed on. The memorial service itself was filled with music and readings that emphasized hope, continuity, and the lasting impact of a life well lived. Family members shared personal reflections that revealed how much they had all grown in the year since their loss, while also acknowledging how much they continued to miss the guidance and presence they had lost. William's remarks at the memorial focused on lessons learned and legacy continued, but they also looked forward to the future with confidence and determination. His words reflected the journey from grief to acceptance to renewed purpose that had characterized the family's experience over the past year. The speech represented not just a memorial tribute, but also a statement of intent for the years ahead. Catherine's closing thoughts at the memorial emphasized the importance of living with purpose and serving others with authenticity and compassion. Her words drew directly from experiences and teachings she had received, but they were expressed in her own voice and reflected her own understanding of what royal service could and should accomplish in the modern world. As the memorial concluded, and the family gathered for a private reception, the atmosphere was markedly different from the grief-stricken gathering that had followed the original funeral. While sadness remained, it was balanced by gratitude, pride in accomplishments achieved, and excitement about possibilities ahead. The year of transition had transformed them all in ways both visible and subtle. The children's participation in the memorial demonstrated how much they had matured in understanding their family's unique role and responsibilities. Their questions and comments revealed growing sophistication about the balance between public duty and private life, as well as genuine enthusiasm for the charitable and service aspects of royal work. That evening, as William and Catherine reflected on the year that had passed, they recognized how profoundly they had been changed by the experience of loss, growth, and expanded responsibility. They had not merely survived a difficult transition, but had emerged stronger, more confident, and more committed to making their own distinctive contribution to the institution they served. The future stretched ahead with both challenges and opportunities, but they faced it with the knowledge that they had successfully honored their inheritance while also making it authentically their own. The foundation built through years of careful preparation, combined with the lessons learned through loss and growth, had equipped them to serve with both competence and genuine commitment to the welfare of others.